Herzlich willkommen bei Focus for Fluency into Intermediate German. This is the first of the trainings that I'll be giving during the next 9 weeks. And today I want to look at the materials that you're going to be getting and how to get the best out of them. Look at the methods I think you could use to great effect on the course. Congratulations, by the way, on signing up. If you really focus for the next 9 weeks, and I'll be doing everything I can to help you do that, there's a real potential for you to see great improvements in your German. First of all, then, I need to share the screen. So a bit of an overview to start with. The course philosophy, if you know me, then you'll know I like a thorough, focused approach. It's quite low tech. It's tried and tested methods. It's not a quick fix, but it does have the potential, as I say, to be really powerful for you. We see language as a skill. It's procedural rather than declarative memory, as they say. It's something that you do rather than something that you know, in a sense. And I'll be explaining how we can learn language and use what we're learning to make sure that we're running them with the grain of how language memory and the brain works when you're learning and speaking a language. I'll be stressing context, that's one aspect of it, for vocabulary learning, looking at how we can isolate and learn chunks and collocations, and I'll explain what those are later on today. And seeing grammar as usable patterns rather than as abstract rules to be learned. Now, the focus in the course is on input. That's to say, this is a listening and reading course. Now, of course, you want to speak German too, and at the end, I think you're going to be much more confident in doing that. Now, to get good at speaking, then you have to go out and speak a lot as well. That's what we call output. But when you understand the answer you get, conversation's a two-way thing. So getting on top of your listening skills, having enough grammar and vocab is really important. And that's what this course is all about. Now, what I'm going to show you today is my 3-stage Fluency Focus Routine, which will work with the materials that you're going to get each week. The idea is that it really simplifies life so that you always know what to do each day. And it works because it focuses on how the brain really works and what language really is. Now, it's a framework. It's not set in stone. There's scope to customize it, of course, to your own preferences. But this is going to be an overview as to how it should work, how I would use the materials. Let's look then now in a bit more detail at the Fluency Focus Routine. The key feature of it is that it puts sound first. That's to say, it incorporates reading and listening, but you start with the audio and only later look at the text. Why is that? Well, first of all, if you can't hear, you're unlikely to be able to produce speech. So we move from listening to speaking. It's a natural order, after all. That's the way babies learn. They hear before they can produce a language. So we're going with the grain. And second, it's actually easier to go from listening to speaking than the reverse. If you don't master the sound system, bad habits will take root, and you lock on to the nearest approximation of the sounds from your own language. So maybe oo instead of ü, the rounded vowels in German, which can be difficult for us native English speakers. So the focus for Fluency Routine is what I call a 3+1 model. First, interactive input, which I'm going to explain now. And second, understanding and taking apart the input that you've had. We look at that today as well. And then third, in the next session, I'm going to look at recall. And what about the plus? Well, that's using the language. And in a third session, I'll have lots of ideas for different ways you can do that after the course and during the course if you've got time, in terms of additional reading, listening, speaking, and writing techniques that you can apply. So what materials are we getting in this course? Well, the key and the core really is the native speed audio German. And you get a transcript for that in German only, first of all. Now, the audio is always a dialogue. It's a man and a woman recorded by native speakers, I think that's the most natural type of speech. And it's easier to work with than a monologue, a wall of text, or with lots of different speakers taking part. It's the natural way that, kids, again, learn to speak a language in conversation with a parent, for example. And the method's going to involve working with short phrases. It's graded in terms of the content of the conversations, the vocabulary, the grammar that's being introduced to your level. So very much focused in on lower intermediate, B1 on the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, German. If it were too difficult for you, you'd be too stressed to perform. And if it was too easy, then there's no incentive to improve, and you will find your mind wandering. You won't be able to concentrate and really focus. So the level has been carefully chosen. And the audio and therefore the transcript are pretty short. And again, this relates to how we're going to start working with the materials, interacting with the materials during the routine, the study routine. It's all about exploiting the power of focus. Then finally, there's a German-English parallel translation, and I'll explain how you can use that. So let's start first of all with stage 1, interactive input. First of all, then, as I said, you're going to be listening. And on Monday, you get the dialogue in MP3 form. Now, you should get an email about this telling you that it's now accessible in the course website area. If for some reason you can't see it, then get in touch with me, fire me an email, and I'll try and work out what's going on. Now, your first step when the audio arrives is to listen through it. You can download it, actually. You should be able to access it on mobile devices, on tablets, or on your laptop. Listen through cold once or twice. It's going to be cold because you haven't got the transcript yet. Don't strain to understand. This is sort of semi-conscious exercise in that you're not trying to strain, but you are focusing your attention on what you're listening to. Now, you won't understand everything. That's intentional. As I said, we've set the level very carefully. The theory underlying this is what the applied linguist, the famous applied linguist Stephen Krashen, calls the concept of comprehensible input. The idea that you learn from input that you can comprehend. And his idea is that it's just above your current level. He calls it L+1, so that you can learn an awful lot from the context as regards to the new structures and items of vocabulary that are presented to you. It's what Vygotsky, the Soviet researcher and psychologist, called the zone of proximal development, the next stage on your fluency journey, if you like. So first of all, listen to the material, but don't start beating yourself up, don't start straining too much, and don't start beating yourself up if you don't understand everything. And I hope you won't understand everything. Now, still on Monday, repeat or write down what you hear. That's the next step of the routine. Basically, it's a dictation exercise. So get a piece of paper and a pencil, and you can work phrase by phrase, pausing the audio. That's the way I would do it, and writing down what you hear. Now rewind and listen again, phrase by phrase if necessary. And if you're not sure, just write down what you think you hear, even if you know it's gobbledygook and it can't possibly be right. Now, why is dictation such a useful exercise? Well, the reason is it forces you to pay attention. If you just listen, your brain might cut out bits that you don't need for comprehension. And we want you to notice the things that actually you don't understand at the moment. This is what the linguist Schmidt calls a noticing hypothesis, that comprehensible input won't lead to progress unless you become aware of a feature. So nothing is learned, he said, until it's been noticed. Now, noticing isn't enough on its own, as we'll see, but it's an essential starting point. So you've had some exposure, first of all, to the audio. Now, by doing the dictation, you're forcing yourself to really pay attention and to start noticing what perhaps you don't actually understand and you don't know. Now, you'll have to work phrase by phrase because you won't be able to write fast enough. But an advantage of this too is it stops you being overwhelmed by all the audio now, and it helps to focus you in on chunks of language. We'll return soon to what I mean by that. By doing the dictation, of course, you're producing your own text that you can check yourself against the transcript, which you're going to get on Tuesday. Do write by hand if at all possible. Again, the research seems to show, or the general view is, that writing down, turning away from the screen, is better for concentration with this sort of exercise than trying to type. People talk about muscle memory. Now, this dictation exercise leaves you with nowhere to hide. As I say, it will really focus your attention on individual structures, words, idiomatic expressions that you didn't know. And more, when you check against the German transcript that you're going to get on Tuesday, you may find that you already know some of the words that you failed to catch in the audio. And this will sharpen your awareness to what we call connected speech, the way that words mush together, and sometimes their phonetic properties change when they're used in context. Action, accent, pronunciation, contractions of words, connected speech. And you'll have useful aha moments as you notice aspects of pronunciation as well. So that's the input stage. It's the interactive input stage, the interaction coming from doing the dictation. Next, stage 2, you've got to understand and take apart what we've heard and what we've written down. Now, the first stage in this, and this is something you could start doing then on Tuesday, I've deliberately held the materials back, so you've got plenty of time to listen and to do the dictation on Monday. But now we want to check your comprehension. So on Tuesday, you will get the German transcript just in German, and you will also get a parallel translation, German on one side, English into the other, on the other side. Now, you can't learn what you don't understand. So this is all about checking your comprehension first of all. You now need to make sure that you understand both the vocabulary and the grammar in the audio clip and in the transcript. And there are 3 opportunities to get clear on the meaning. First of all, on Tuesday, you can compare your manuscript now that you took your dictation result from Monday with the transcript. And if the meaning is not clear, then you can look at the parallel text and the translation into English and try and work out from there which phrases correspond to the English. The translation in the English, which I did, is quite free in places. It's not always a rigid translation. I've tried to get natural idiomatic English in the same way we've got natural idiomatic German. On Wednesday, you're going to get the Wortlabor, as we call it, the word laboratory. And that's a spotlight on selected words from the dialogue with paraphrases, explanations, all in German as to what those words mean. Try and understand from that rather than rushing to a dictionary, because the dictionary will give you meanings that words or phrases have in other contexts as well. We want to keep focused on the context and not to be distracted by reaching for other materials at this stage. And then finally, of course, some of the things you won't have understood from the dictation won't be individual words or phrases, but they'll be grammar points. And on Thursday, you get the Musterwerkstatt, which is the patterns, Werkstatt. What's the Werkstatt? So good at German, he can't remember his English. The workshop, isn't it? And they will be explained again. Sabrina has done explanations in German, and there were also exercises there. Now, the grammatical patterns will either be new. We are introducing patterns which are required in the B1 syllabus of the Goethe Institute. That's been one of the ways I've designed what's in this course. They'll either be new to you, or they'll be expanding on basics that you already know in your German so far, or you'll already know them completely, in which case it will be consolidation. But that's good as well, because the cognitive psychologists say we should be practicing what they call overlearning, which is learning even when you think you've already got it, because you might not have in fact. So these are ways you can get clear on the meaning of the audio text and the transcript that you've seen during the course of the week. Now, when you're focusing on meaning, I want you to look mainly at vocab chunks and language patterns. I want to explain what they are and why you should work with them. First of all, though, when you're checking the manuscript, you could print it out or download it and print it out and make notes perhaps on the German-only transcript, because there's a bit more space there. So it could be underlining, it could be writing down translations of words, or German from the Wortlabor, an explanation in German, or from the Musterwerkstatt of what actually the phrase or the word, the individual word that you didn't understand means. So underline the new vocab and grammar, jot down an English translation, as I say, or German explanation. So you're taking the text apart, not just to understand now though, but because a key part of stage 3 is to set up a foolproof memory system for your selected new items. And that we'll be looking at in the next training. Where you can, underline chunks, not individual words. Now, your chunk of language could be as short as 2 words, or it could run to a small complete phrase. Let's look at some examples of chunks. So a chunk might be a short phrase which gives a new word illustrative context with a word central to it. It could be a colourful phrase which has an equivalent in English but is very different, something particularly idiomatic. Chunks of language could be collocations, 2 words that are habitually used together, so much that other combinations just don't sound right, even though they might be grammatically correct. So eine Prüfung ablegen, to lay aside, to give up an exam, to hand in an exam. When we say in English, I would sit an exam, for example. And it's just convention that we say things that way. So collocations. It could be a word combination that illustrates new declensions, new case endings that we're learning in the Musterwerkstatt, or how a preposition is used or how it declines, or for that matter, illustrates any grammar pattern that's completely new or you don't feel familiar enough with yet. Really, any combination of words which strikes you as how a native would say it, you can underline as a chunk and write a little explanation as to what it means. And do that especially if it's different from how you would say the idea in your native language, because the risk is always when you're speaking then you're going to translate literally and get it wrong. Not doing that is one of the big advantages of chunking, as it's called. The first one, though, is that the context makes individual words easier to remember. Generally, it's easier to remember a short phrase than it is to remember a single contextless word when you come back to review it later on. But when speaking, it also makes you more confident and fluent if you learn in chunks. There are 2 reasons for this, really. First, you know that you're learning a phrase that's right. Whereas if you just learned individual words and grammar rules, you won't have time to put the words together on the wing. But also if you try and build a sentence like adding beads to a string, you'll often get it wrong, or you'll produce something that's grammatically correct, but just not the way a German would say the phrase. So it gives you confidence, you know it's right. And yes, you're more fluent because you've got a chunk that you can deploy straight away. And that's not only about not building your parachute on the way down, as it were, but also it's about how working memory works. And apparently, the working memory that we use when we're pulling information out of our long-term memory can only store so much information at once. But one chunk of language seems to count as one piece of information. So what do you want, a chunk or just one isolated word? What the brain seems to do when we speak as fluent or as native speakers is to pull out from the thousands and thousands of chunks that it has stored away. There just isn't time when you're speaking at a native pace to retrieve individual words into your working memory. So learning by chunks reflects how working memory operates, how the memory operates when you're speaking as a fluent speaker of the language. So that's it, basically. And to finish, you return to the text. The last thing that you would do would be to look at the text again and consolidate. You've pulled it apart now. You should understand it thoroughly at this stage. If you've still got problems, you can ask in the Facebook group or you can email me. And you run through now with a final, round off a run through of the whole text. So take the transcript and read the text out loud. That's one thing that you can do. First of all, listen again to remind you about it, and then it's your turn. Turn off the audio, read it out loud, throw yourself into it. So perform the whole thing. Make a bit of a show of this. Stand up, read in a dramatic, even an exaggerated way. Imagine the events that you're there as vividly as you can, bringing in emotion, imagining images, sounds, smells. This will all aid retention of the text of the German. And the other alternative you can do is a technique called shadowing. The final slide, I just want to explain what that is, in case you haven't come across it before. So shadowing is simply saying the text at the same time as the recording. It's almost a shadow of what's being said, a sort of spontaneous, of course there'll be a slight delay, perhaps echo of what's being said. You can do it with the transcript in front of you. It's not a memory test. What it's about really is getting the sound and the accent as accurate as possible. It may seem an unusual thing to do, but it can be really effective. You want to sound as much like the original as you can. So it's not just about accent, it's also about trying to mimic stress and intonation of the native speakers. Again, stand up, throw yourself into the exercise. Now, you may well not have done this before, and it can take some practice to get used to the techniques. You might want to do it through a few times. It's something that you could do at the very end of the week, for example. And you can work phrase by phrase with a bit of a delay using the pause button until you get the hang of it, of course. But it is a very useful technique and one that you might like to try instead of simply reading out the text on your own, having listened to it first. I haven't said anything about the exercises in the Musterwerkstatt. Now, you get those with the Musterwerkstatt on Thursday, and it's really up to you how much of those you want to do. There are quite a few exercises. I personally like doing exercises. I know that some people don't. But of course, you can look at those and you can complete those. And once you're sure you've got them right, they provide sources of additional chunks really as well that you could use later on when you're practicing recall. So the exercises are there for you to use if you want to. You may find you don't have time. Something comes up one evening, you've less time to study. One morning, your slot falls by the wayside because there's something going on at home, or you have to be into work earlier. I would say the stages that I've outlined today are more important than completing all the exercises. Maybe dip in and out of the exercises, and you can always come back to the exercises later on in the course if you have a bit of extra time, or later on after the course is finished. And I hope you'll want to do that. So that's basically the routine that we're going to apply, or at least the first two stages of it. In the next training, which will be coming up soon, I'm going to look at stage 3 and talk all about recall. Das war es also für heute. You've now got an overview of the materials that you'll be getting and how to work with them. By the way, I didn't say that the answers to the exercises in the Musterwerkstatt you'll get only on Sunday. So if you do want to do them on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, you're not tempted to peek at them. So that was it. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm really glad that you decided to join the course, and I hope you're going to have a stimulating time and enjoy the process. If you've got questions, as always, drop me an email, ask Sabrina or myself in the Facebook group. I look forward to taking you on this journey in the next 9 weeks. So, los geht's. See you soon. Tschüss.